You're listening to the Sketchnote Army Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook. And this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey, are you looking for the ideal sketchbook for your sketchnoting practice? The Sketchnote Idea Book is the sketchbook designed for sketchnoters. Equipped with no bleed, no show-through paper, you can take almost any marker or pen you can throw at it. Get 10% off with code ARMY at airship.store. Hey everyone, it's Mike Rohde, and I'm excited to present Season 15's All the Tips episode. Of course, if you've been listening for any amount of time, you'll know that this is a tradition here for the last several seasons, where we gather all the tips from every episode into one episode, and then we lay it over some inspirational music to give you a little moment to be inspired by these tips again, and to encourage you as you go forward in your visual thinking journey. I'm so happy that we've had so many great people on the show. Of course, we've had 9 of them, and excited for each one. Maggie Appleton to start off the season. Of course, the return of Aljo Porras. We had Alina Gutierrez, who's someone new and working in Canada, which is great. Pao Baresi on the show as well. Clare Olen, schlager, Jim Holstebro, Deb Aoki, Chen, and Julian Klit round out the season, and I'm excited for each one of them. They each brought something really unique to their episodes and just different thoughtful ways to think about visual thinking. And so I present to you these tips from each one compressed in a single episode, and we will talk to you again in October of 2024 with Season 16. Until then, talk to you soon. Maggie Appleton.
One is definitely, playing with GIFs. I just had never thought about them before. To me, they were like, oh, them just memes. And really just reading a basic amount about how GIFs work and the technology behind them and like how you can make simple ones just made me be like, oh, this is such a fruitful medium that I think most people don't explore. So for someone that makes images already, just trying to make a GIF is like probably going to open you up to be like, oh, I never thought about, a 3-sequence image or like a little interactive image. So that would be one, a little new medium to play with. Second, I'd say we already touched on this, but like if you haven't played with Midjourney or DALL-E, I'd prefer Midjourney. I think it's more interesting. Yeah. It's kind of worth just paying for a single month and then just exploring and treating it like a game, not thinking you're going to make final artwork out of this or use anything. Just be like, I'm playing a video game right now and I can query this just to show me anything I want. And I love just being like noun plus style plus verb or something, like Mad Libs, but with this crazy image memory machine that's just like somehow synthesized all the images you've already made. So it's just wild to play with. I think it is worth understanding what's possible in it and what's not possible.
I think it's good too that you think of it as a game. So you kind of give it, like the way you approach it is as much important as the tool itself, because then, your expectations lower, your opportunity for being, surprised go up. If you're not like, I have to achieve this and it's got to be done by Friday, that changes the way you approach a tool than just, hey, let's just see what it can deliver. Let's play. Which is good.
Yeah, exactly. I think just playing with that might be fruitful for ideas or new styles, but might just be a fun time where you kind of learn to understand what these are possible for as we kind of move forward in the world of AI generation. And then lastly, I kind of want to encourage people to, I don't know, I assume your audience would know about this stuff. What I think of as like interactive visual essays. Have you seen like the stuff the New York Times does that's like very rich scrolling, like beautiful animations as you go? I've been obsessed with these for a long time, right? These have been around for ages. We call it scrollytelling for a minute, but this sort of like long form writing that is like richly supported by visuals and animations, and it's all intertwined. Like the writing and the images all go together, just like in sketchnoting. There's no kind of separation of mediums. And ones on the web that do this, I think, are especially magical because you get that interactivity and you can kind of hover and scroll and they can react to that. Exploring those, I just don't think there's enough of this on the web right now, and I'm kind of like maybe it's too hard, maybe it's too complex as a medium for people to work in. But going and exploring some of these interactive essays or like long form visual essays, I think is one way to really open up your practice to think about how you could like write a piece and then integrate images into it or like add animation into it. I'm trying to do this much more. So I'm kind of pushing on this at the moment, that everyone is into writing, and they're into writing like words and just words. And I'm like, you should have like an image every paragraph, or you should have, you know, something that flows through all these words. I think blending words and images are when things get really interesting, not just in comic book form, but we could be doing this in a whole new way on the web.
Yeah, even in a low-tech way, I could see that happening where, especially people listening to this, sketchnoters, visual thinkers, where you could have the written text and then based on that do illustrations or sketchnotes or whatever you want to call it. And then and all they would have to be, you can make them full width, you know, with a lot of these tools will allow that. So you get to this point and suddenly, you know, you get this full width image that sort of takes up and you have to pass through it, right? If you think about it as a scrolling thing, like it doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to do crazy animations, just bold imagery and text, the text you choose, the size of the text, all those things can make it a really compelling thing and tell a story. So it's definitely approachable by regular people with just like a Squarespace or a, you know, Tumblr or whatever, or WordPress. You can produce these things with a little bit of exploration. So interesting. Yeah, but most of the ones on my site aren't technically complex at all. They're a static image just intertwined with the words, or small doodles like as breakers in between paragraphs. There's only a handful that really are more technically complex, I'd say. And it's interesting that you don't need really much, like just a little bit really can give it the spice and flavor and make and totally change the perception, right? It doesn't have to be crazy. That crazy project could just be a few little tidbits in the right places, which is pretty cool. Everybody can do it. Everybody can do it. Aljo Porras.
Okay, I'm gonna say the first one on second place. The first one would actually be to show up. I firmly believe that success is not what you achieve once you do something. Success is showing up. It's believing in yourself that you are enough to take space in the world and show what you do. I think that's the first thing. Just show up consistently, be present, care about what you do. The second one with that, I think it's kind of like a requisite, and that's why I'm kind of merging it, kind of weird, but be kind to yourself. And I say this, you know, maybe if you're listening and you're a little bit like me, just a little bit like me, you struggle with some insecurities, not because you feel like you're not capable, but because you're afraid of how people might perceive you. I have been for ages kind of people pleaser. I love to make people feel well. I love it. And I love to give a good impression for people, but I've had to learn in the next few years that I also need to think about my own well-being, and sometimes not doing my best or not approaching something makes me kind of doubt myself or be too hard on myself. So this idea of being kind to yourself, I think it's at the core of whatever you're going to try, because if you're doing something for the first time, or you're doing something that you haven't done a lot, it's just logical that you're probably going to suck at it. You know, you're going to be very bad. You're probably going to fail a lot, and that's okay. So while you're attempting these new things, be kind to yourself to remember, I'm learning, I'm trying, I'm doing my best, I'm growing, and this is moving me forward. Because if you're not kind with yourself, you're going to stop showing up. And that would be a shame, because people will miss you, like the world will miss your gift. So show your gift, you know, show up consistently, be kind to yourself. The third one could be, I guess I'm going to frame it as the golden rule sort of thing. Maybe it's just a platinum rule. You know, the golden rule is like, do unto others what you would have done unto yourself. And I like to challenge that a little bit, because some people, like, if I were to treat people how I like to be treated, some people will not get it right. You know, like I'm a very, and this is a funny story, parenthesis here, in Costa Rica and Latin America in general, we're very touchy. You know, we hug, you know, we're very, hey, how you doing? And the first time that I was here in the United States, I had a friend that took me to his college and introduced me some people there, and there were like these 3 ladies on a table. They were having lunch, and it's like, hey, this is Alejo, it's my friend from Costa Rica, and I immediately went and say hi with a kiss on the cheek, and they were like, what just happened? And I was like, did I do something wrong? What happened? He said, we don't do that here. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't like, that's how we do it. It's probably very naive of me, but now I know, like, not everybody likes to be greeted that way. And that's a boundary that I respect. So I don't treat people how I would like them to treat me. I try to figure out how they want to be treated and then treat them that way. So I will say the third one would be, well, the second one is be kind to yourself. And the third one would be curious about other people so that you can learn how to treat them better, so that you can learn how to make them feel appreciated, loved. Because that not only goes for like personal relationships, like very close, like a partner or family or stuff like that, but, we are in business. Most of the people that listen here have some sort of business or are working in some capacity. And when you treat other people according to how they need to be treated, you're showing them that you care for them, that you respect them. And that creates a better relationship that can enhance the work that you have with them, and can even like make you like you so much that they can recommend you to others. So you never know how this is going to happen. In general, I feel like just being a nice person, it's a good thing. So try to be a nice person. On to the point of like, I am being nice, but I'm not being nice for people to like me. I'm just being nice because I like people. It's very different, right? I'm going to say that again, probably, because it might take some time to kind of let it sink in. Being nice because you like other people, not because you're trying to make them like you. There are too many different things. The second one is people pleasing. The first one is just an attitude of you are a loving person, and it changes completely. You're not approaching things as if you were needy or craving for attention. You're just trying to be helpful, and that makes that if somebody doesn't appreciate what you give or is being disrespectful with you, you can put boundaries and you can, keep your cool, I would say, without feeling attacked or sad or, depressed or anything like that. So
it takes away the burden, right? You can be nice to people because it's just the right thing to do without any strings to say, oh, I have to, if you have to like me now. That's the trade, where the unspoken trade is I'm going to be nice to you, but you have to like me. And you can just let go of that, right? Like, it's just this is just the way I am. Whether you're mean to me or you're nice to me, I'm going to still be consistent. I'm going to still treat you the right way because that's the way my mom and dad taught me. That's the way I think is the right way. I want my kids to treat people that way, and that's the way it's going to be. So how you react has nothing to do with how I treat you, kind of, almost.
Absolutely. And I had this conversation recently on LinkedIn because I shared like a few. There was somebody who put like a list of the most prominent or cool like visual artists, in LinkedIn and something like that. And I was like, oh, I like this. I'm gonna tag some people that I know. And I tagged some. My son was like, hey, Papa, come play with me. So I didn't write everybody that I could think of. I just like wrote a few and then sent it. And then somebody started adding up. It's like, oh, there's so many people doing this thing. This is amazing. Let's just share and, highlight everybody. And then somebody wrote me personally, and this person was a little bit conflicted. It was like, I didn't add anybody there because I had this, this person just became like very honest with me. It's like, there's a lot of great people doing these things. But I feel like some of them, they just don't reciprocate. Some of them are just doing their own thing, or I feel like they're playing ignore me or, something like that. And I was telling this person, it's their problem, it's if they, and maybe they're just too busy, or maybe they just don't like social media and it's not anything personal. So I'd rather give them the benefit of the doubt. Right. Be like, well, I'm doing this because of who I am, because I want to help my audience by showing them people that I admire, even if some of these people might never return any favors to me. I don't care. it's me, the one who's being generous, and that's all I care about. So, if somebody's being straight up bully with you, then, of course, I'll promote them.
Yeah.
But, besides that, I think from your heart of generosity, nothing bad can come.
Yeah, I think it's just a good way to operate in the world. I've just seen it open too many good opportunities. Even just being nice to the person I picked up a prescription the other day, and I was chatting with the lady, and she said, drive safely. Just there's opportunities everywhere. Yeah. But a lot of times we are so in our head, or we're so afraid to mess up, we don't say anything, and there's opportunities to be nice, and maybe you made somebody's day. I don't know. Alina Gutierrez.
So the first thing that I always tell people is, and I think it applies to everything, but it applies to visual notes, is it doesn't matter in which part of this process you are, push yourself a little bit to try something new. So it doesn't become boring. There's always that thing of I tell people, if you're scared, it's because you care. But it's also if you're not scared, if you feel so confident, it's you're not pushing yourself enough. So, in my case, for example, it's trying a new medium, or, pushing myself to try new icons, try new ways to engage with the audience. So, in whatever facet this comes, if you're a really experienced graphic facilitator, then I will invite you to push yourself to find different ways to engage with the audience, because I found throughout the years that the more people are engaged with the creation of the visual, the more impact it has with the group. It's not the same thing when I'm that silent partner in the corner that people just see at the end and they're like, oh wow, really cool, and that's it, let's move next, move past that, than when they're part of this co-creation. They're actually feeding you ideas, and then at the end they see their ideas with illustrations and they're like, oh, I said that, look, there's a drawing of what I said, and they get super excited. There's way more buy-in. I actually just visited a client who I did a strategic session for 8 years ago, and they had my poster on the wall. And I was like, wow. And she's like, it's so amazing, because this poster happened when the initiative didn't exist. They were brainstorming about it. And now they're a full department, and they take grants, and they help students with innovation projects. And they're like, that was our first session when we dreamt about, it was our dream that all this stuff would happen, and now it's happening. And they still have that poster there. But they were engaged throughout the session, right? They were coming to me, they were giving me post-its, they were saying, so, engage people. If you're starting, then pushing yourself might mean, you haven't tried taking live notes. And I think that's a scary step for anyone. One thing is taking notes for yourself, doing summaries or whatever, but no one is going to look to see them. Or also you don't have that time pressure. When it comes to taking live notes, I think there's always that, it's a big leap. But I would say, first, don't compare yourself with someone who's been doing it for 10 years. If I would have compared myself when I started with someone who was doing it 10 years and I would have stopped because of that, I would not be doing what I'm doing right now.
Right.
I knew what I could do, and, and I was transparent with my clients. And I would say, as far as you're using arrows and speech bubbles, you're already being more visual than most people. So I would say, give yourself realistic goals. They're a little bit stretched, but they're not too far out, so you're paralyzed and you don't do anything. Mm-hmm. And if you're not taking the live notes yet, then I tell people, listen to a TED Talk or listen to a podcast and take notes. And then you tell yourself, this time I'm going to have one icon. When it gets to the point that having just one icon in your notes is too easy, then you have 2 icons per podcast, then 3, then 4. It could be just an icon for the title and the rest is a mind map with no more visuals. But you're already doing something more visual than what you were doing before. So it's just taking those baby steps, but keep pushing it to the next level. That was 7 tips in one.
Well, Esther will have fun finding those tips and putting them in. So we'll make sure we capture those and number them for you, everybody. And they'll also appear, of course, in our end of the season, all the tips episodes, so you can hear this all again with everybody else. So
I'm so excited for the end of the season tips to see how
a lot of people say that's their favorite episode. Yeah, it's a great one.
Is it okay if I add another tip to the?
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So I would say try doing something or taking visual notes or whatever it is from something you've never experienced before. Let me explain that. If you're really, let's say you're in the tech industry, try to do that listening to someone talking about design. No, design thinking is good in the tech industry. Someone talking about, human systems or facilitation or even like medical innovation, whatever it is. Like, just look for something that you're not an expert in and take visual notes of that. I love it because sometimes it's like we're already comfortable. We fall into we're comfortable enough doing visual notes of whatever we know best. But it also, I would say it gives you the exposure to learn something new, which is always good for creativity. It's been proven again and again. It also shows you how much you don't have to be an expert of something to be able to take these visual notes. So even going back to that person who's scared of taking live visual notes, doing that might help you build your confidence a little bit, in the sense that, you don't have to be an expert. You'll understand enough for you to be able to do a visual summary. And it's also because I think the more things that and the more fields that we're exposed to, the more we start seeing how we can transfer one thing to another. So I think it's a good practice, and it's something that I push myself to do when I'm getting really comfortable in somewhere. So it goes back to the uncomfort, like leaving your comfort zone, but the being exposed, like getting yourself exposed to different things and different tools, and looking for inspiration. People are like, I don't want to copy anyone. You're not going to copy. Even if you try, you can't do exactly the same thing. Your style is different. But every time that I'm like, I feel like doing, I don't know, there's 3 or 4 posters that they look too similar, I start looking for other people in the field that are doing visual notes and see what they do that I'm not doing. So like, maybe I'm always putting the title up, my comfort zone is putting title center, but top center. And he's like, okay, you know what? Next time I'm going to do title in the middle. And it's uncomfortable. And I get like, the first line is always the hardest. So, but try to do something that you haven't done before. And that sometimes helps with the blockage in whatever sense that you're doing it, or just doing the first line. Sometimes I sign my poster before I start. A blank paper is intimidating. A blank piece of paper is really scary. And when I feel like stakes are high, sometimes I start staring at this and I'm like, why am I doing this again? Like I get really nervous before every single time before I start taking visual notes. And if I see that nervousness is going to the next level, I'm like, you know what? I know doing that first line is the hardest. Once I get into it, I'm in my zone and I'm having fun. So even if that means signing your piece before you get it started, sign it. It's not blank anymore. So it's kind of like
committed.
You're committed. You're already started. Just jump and keep going.
Those are great tips. Thank you, Alina. It's helpful to hear your perspective and more good inspiration for people who are doing this work to encourage them. So thank you.
Per Pao Baresi.
I think I will give 3 mindset tricks because for us it's more important the mind than the end. Especially in our work, the first of all, have fun. As you write in your book, if you don't have fun, you can do this kind of job, this kind of work is not your field. You have to think positively every time and try to play with yourself, especially when you listen and you have to synthesize in real time. If you don't have fun, you can create nothing. The second thing is do what you know. We are professionals. We a lot of clients for our point of view, but in general for our experience, try to guide you, but it's not correct. Is you have to guide the client because you are a specialist. We are specialists in this field, and it's not to be super egocentric, but it's true. If you want to have the best results from us, you have to trust us, and doing what you know is the only way to make yourself sure and be perceived as a sure person, as a professional person. So the focus is I'm good on that, and I do that. And try to implement and grow up on what you love, what is the obsession of your life. And the third thing I can say as a trick is to give thanks. As I mentioned before, we are super lucky. I had the possibility to meet super HR manager, super people manager, marketing manager of big brands. We have to steal from them and to report to our community, and doing this is giving thanks because we have this good possibility to have an impact. We have an impact during our scribing session because the responsibility is huge. We can evidence the difference or eliminate some difference. We have to be really responsible when we do scribe, but the same responsibility is to what we learn in the big companies is to pass to the community where we live.
Very cool. Clare Olen.
Well, I think I'd start off with practice, and because with practice you develop your own way of visual thinking, because it's about paper layout. When you start, you want to have an idea of how you're going to place things on paper, which also I think brings me to that white spaces don't matter. So when I started, I would put everything together, and it would kind of intertwine, because sometimes you want to add a picture or word, or you want to tie it together with a border or with a color or whatever. So I think another tip would also be don't be afraid of white spaces, because in the end what you do is you finish it off, and you'll notice that those white spaces won't matter. You also need a bit of peace and quiet in your sketch.
Yeah.
If it's too full, it's too much.
Yeah.
And if you're able to work in quiet spots in your sketch, I think it's also good to have a bit of peace and quiet on your paper or in your notes. And I think with all the talking about tools, etc., it's not really about the tools, because, like I was saying about my students, I think you have to try, and then you try different tools, and then you work out that you prefer the 0.1 over the 0.8 pen, or the other way around, and whether you prefer the Caran d'Ache over Stabilo pencils or whatever. And it's not really about the tool, so don't go around buying whole sets. Start off with one. Yeah. Usually you can also buy one color of a certain pen or a certain pencil. First, try it out before you invest in lots of tools that you're not really going to use. And that's why I also think of buying a whole box of pencils or a whole box of pens, felt tip pens or whatever colors. There's a lot of colors you're never going to use.
Right.
Yeah. So it might feel like it's more expensive to buy the single pencil, but in the end, if you're only going to be using 3 of the colors of a whole box, in these days, you also have to think about not wasting too much. Yeah.
Cool. Those are great.
So that would be. I don't know. Did I say think in pictures? I'm not sure whether I said that already.
That can be number 4, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I notice, I do drawings for educational meetings, and then they'll have a theme. And then what I always find myself saying is, if they have a theme for one of their evenings, they have a title. The title's usually very general. So I find myself always asking them, what kind of words do you think of when you're within your theme? And those words will help you find the icons and the pictures, and metaphors will help sometimes as well. And that reminds me that what a good link would also be is the noun project.
Yeah.
The noun project is where if you have a word, you can type it in, and it gives you all kinds of digital drawings that people have made, little icons, and not that you use them, but they are good for inspiration for what you can use in your drawing yourself or in your sketch. So I use that a lot as well with the Noun project. Yeah.
That's great. Those are great tips. So we have 4 good tips and solid ones that you can apply right away. Thank you. Jimmy Holstebro.
I think it's maybe it's obvious because we just talked about it, but don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself on gadgets or it does not have to be the right notebook or the right pen or it's nice to have, but it's not you don't need it. Just grab paper, pencil, pen, whatever you have and start doing it. And number 2 would of course be exactly that. Just do it. We are so fortunate, not like when we were kids, Mike, I had to take my bike and ride I don't know how many kilometers to go to the library if I needed any kind of inspiration other than what was in my mind, you know. You just open your smartphone, your laptop, your iPad, whatever you have at your hand, and you can find tutorials, you can find everything. I would have been, I've been the greatest artist in the world if I had those opportunities when I was a kid, I think. Hours I have been sitting, copying stuff to get better. If I could just sit down and watch all the good guys doing all the good things and copy that and rehearse, that would be. And of course, that's maybe tip number 3. I always kind of say to students I work with, do you play any kind of instrument? And people say, no, if they do, they do, and if they don't, they don't. And I ask them, how do you get good at playing an instrument? Yeah, by rehearsing. Exactly, And it's the same thing with drawing. If you want to be good at it, you have to do it. Yeah, you just have to do it. But the funny thing with drawing is that we kind of all have at least 10 years experience of drawing. And it's sitting in us, it's living in us, that we kind of think that it's a thing we ought to, should have to do, could do better, and because we all have done a lot of drawings. As what's her name? It's a TED talk, and she's talking about. That's where I first heard it. It's not her foundings, but it's the only universal language we have, and it's evolving all over the globe in the same fashion. From you can get a crayon in your hand till 12 years old. It evolves in the precise same way all over the globe. So it's a universal language we have, but then, of course, our brains at some times understand now the things I'm drawing does not look like reality. And then most people stop drawing, And also because we're not encouraged to continue doing it in school, which is, in Denmark at least, getting better. People are getting better and better at understanding that we have to, utilize all the modalities to make greater retention, understanding, and engagement, and all those kind of things, which are also very, very interesting. And so do it. Just do it, and don't think if you want to use visual communication as a tool. It's not about being. Of course, if you use it, you rehearse every day, you utilize it. You do, of course, get better, but it's not about being good at drawing. Not at all. It's being good at communicating. It's being good at listening. It's being good at visualizing ideas, and it's the ideas of things, and they are often and normally very, very simple icons of reality, So it's not you're not doing lifelike portraits or anything. That it's not what it's about. It's about conveying ideas. Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you. which is of course also something I'm very, very interested in. And I don't know if that's a question of all, but now I'm just going to tell you. I'm working on. I told you I'm glad to be educated, and actually I'm working hard on trying to see if I can build even more education on top of what I've already done, because I think there's some questions that need to be answered, and it is, what is it drawing? Why is it drawing actually works as well as it does? So I'm right now I'm trying to just as a start, collecting as much evidence as there is. See who's been researching in stuff like this, and because it draws from psychology and movie studies and all kinds of things. But there's not really doing a lot of studying in what is it exactly drawing does. And why does it do? Because we all feel it works when you look at a drawing, and we have all kinds of sayings like a picture says more than 1,000 words. Right. Why is it? Why is it that it does that? That could be interesting, and maybe, and I don't know if it ends out with that, but I'm willing to do like a PhD on that subject if it comes down to that. So, because it would also be a very good selling point for people like us. But we have to draw because research tells us exactly that it works in this and that way.
And here's why.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm very, very occupied of. As we're going into 24, it's some of the things I'm trying to get laid out, planned out. What's the direction for this, and how do I somehow get that into motion?
Sounds like a keystone project for you, something that could be a lifetime achievement kind of thing.
Hope so. Cool. I'm very occupied with it right now, and I've been a couple of last years, and I've also. We haven't been talking about that. I've been in some other programs where we're talking about it. I also made, one of the first, I don't know how it is in US, but I've been one of the founders of making visual communication as graphical visual communication education that actually gives you points as in a bachelor degree in Denmark.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds excellent. Deb Aoki.
I guess, because like you, I come from writing background, and I tend to see people who get really, when I teach my class, I get people who are very tight about their drawing, right? Or very feeling like they're not an artist, and so therefore they can't draw. So I end up breaking it down into, you're writing letters, and then you're learning how to write words, and you're learning how to write sentences, and from the sentences you get stories. And if you think about it in building blocks, right, like your letters are the straights, the curves, the circles, the shapes, right? And then you put that together to make people, places, things. That's the words. And then you add conjunctions and connectors, or adjectives, right? Like, and that would be like arrows and boxes to group things, or like, little line, radiating lines to show something is new, or swirling lines, to show like a different mood, or using different sizes of type. So that's your connectors to make sentences. And then when you have all of these things together, then it becomes a story. So if you think about it like as a form of alphabet and writing system, versus thinking of it as a artistic system, then it just feels more approachable.
I think so. Lowers the bar a lot.
And I guess the other thing I'll tell people, like, like we're all stuck in boring meetings a lot. So sometimes I find that I'll practice my sketch notes in boring meetings, and I'll
not much to lose.
And it's sometimes then it's like the key thing, right? You write the words, and then you leave space for images, and then it's just kind of even practice. Sometimes I'll draw the people in the meeting to practice drawing different facial expressions, or I'll challenge myself to draw tricky visual concepts. Like lately I had to recently do a storyboard to illustrate large language models for AI. That was tricky. Bitcoin was tricky. It was the other one before. Things, or like AR, how would I draw AR and VR experiences? And so like what I did with that was I would draw the person with the VR glasses in green. The rest of the body was, black and white. And then I would make like a pointed, like a word balloon, but I would make it a square word balloon pointing at the glass and outline in green. So what that would indicate is that this is what they're seeing through the glasses. And then anything they were seeing in the glasses, I would draw in green as well.
I see.
So then, in the context of
separate
the real
those.
world. So it's kind of like there's, especially if you work in tech or anything that's abstract, like finance or healthcare. Some things you're dealing with sometimes a lot of abstract concepts. So then and these will be like your greatest hits, right? These are things that's going to come up for you over and over again. So like figure out your icon or symbol for it. Kind of like when I teach my class, and I teach it to different, I teach to healthcare companies, tech companies, some that are more enterprise or more cloud focused, some are more like retail or e-commerce focused. I teach them a basic curriculum, and then I customize the second half for their industry. Saying like, I'm not here to, like Duolingo, right? Duolingo will teach me stuff like, my sister teaches geology at the university, and it's like, I never use that in a sentence when I go to Japan, right? Yeah. I'd like to order this, but could I get it with the kimchi on the side instead of this? Yeah. Or how much is this? Or where's the bathroom?
Practical things,
Practical, right? So I try to, when I teach my drawing class, I go like, here's the basics, and here's your greatest hits for your industry. Here's how to draw a shopping cart if you're in e-commerce. Here's how to draw your company logo really fast. Things like that, right? So
things you're going to use a lot, yeah.
So I'm always really focused, like when I think of it as language learning, I try to think of it as what's the stuff you need. Because you don't need to learn how to draw everything in the world.
Yeah.
Just the stuff in your world.
That's a great second tip. So first one is think of it as language. The second is to build greatest hits of the things you're going to use often, using that language.
I think the third one is just be visual with fun, low stakes things.
Yeah, good point.
Like sometimes people get really bent, like oh my god, if I'm going to do sketchnoting at a conference, everyone's going to look at it and it has to be perfect, right? Or if I'm going to do sketchnoting at work, and it has, everyone's going to see it and it has to be good. It's like, then when I say, well, how about sketchnotes for fun, low stakes things, like a favorite recipe, or like a travel journal, or or like even sketching your favorite TV show. Like what happens.
That's a good one.
So think of fun way, or I think another one is draw with young people. Yeah. If you have your kids or nieces or nephews or any young people you come in contact with, draw with them, have fun with them, and draw together. And you'll find that, that's how I got started. My mom drew with me when I was young, right? So it invites you to enjoy it as fun. It invites you to, play together in a spirit of experimentation and low stakesness. But also, kind of when you're with kids, you just kind of learn. I don't need to worry about a lot of these things. Yeah, right?
Don't put too much burden on yourself.
Yeah, or treat yourself as kindly as you would a kid, right?
Yeah.
Who's just learning how to draw.
Yeah.
And then
that's a good idea.
I think so much of it gets blocked because as adults we judge ourselves too harshly.
Yeah. Put too much burden on ourselves,
for even a very beginner efforts, right? So, there's always a time and a place to be better, but you'll never get better if you never at least go through a lot of rounds of being not so good at it.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't matter that's not so good. You're at least doing it.
Right. Learning every time.
Because we were talking about people who use AI for these kind of things. It's like, you're missing the point. You're missing, like, the true joy of the sketchnoting is the motor memory, the activity, the connection between your muscles and your, the thing and your visual, and then it ends up being reinforcing something in your brain. So it's the drawing. Like, I've taught my drawing classes through Zoom, but I find it's so much more fun if it's in person.
Yeah. Alan, Chen.
I think one of the things I often say is whether you're starting out or
whether you're somebody who just wants to improve. Let's say you've already got a significant amount of skill and you want to improve. I always say to people, aim for your creative minimum. And what I mean is, most of the time, when we set out to learn new skills, we place this high expectation on setting aside time, in the hope that our skills build as quickly as possible. It's the same like, if you go to the gym and if you beat yourself up if you're not going every day or something like that, and you skip a session, you'll feel like everything's derailed. But the truth is, I feel like any skill, visual thinking takes a good deal of time to actually hone. So don't aim for Spartan levels of training instantly. I feel like instead you should start out by drawing for at least 2 minutes a day. It's actually so much harder than it looks, but if you keep it up, the results will definitely speak for themselves. Another tip I would say is practice on paper more than on digital if you can. Paper doesn't allow for undoing, so this is actually so much more valuable than people realize, because when you make an error, you actually get to see them, and then you can collect them, and then your mind gets a chance to register them as an error, and then you can make actually a conscious decision about how you want to adjust that error. But when you undo something, you actually don't have the benefit of seeing the error, and you're so much more likely to make the same mistake over and over and over again. So yeah, definitely analog over digital is one thing. And I think, as I said before, analog skills, they carry over to digital, because analog skills are hand-eye coordination skills, but digital skills don't carry across to analog. And I've even found myself sometimes when I'm sketching stuff on paper, like double tapping the paper to try to undo something, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is insane. It builds bad habits if you're doing that. So fortunately, I don't do that too often, but like I have found myself doing that once or twice, and I just have a laugh at myself. The other tip that I would recommend is to try to link your habits. So what I mean is, okay, let's take for example sitting down. Most people sit down a lot, whether it's for a meeting or a coffee or a meal. I think sitting down takes up probably half of our waking time. So if you can link sitting with sketching, I think you've already solved half of your dilemma. Now the trick is, if you can have a sketchbook that you can bring with yourself on your body without it being a hassle, you'll reduce the level of difficulty by a lot. So small sketchbooks, I think, are the way to go. And then I always say keep like a felt tip marker or a ballpoint pen or anything you can write with on you, so that it makes that habit easier to actually achieve.
Those are great tips. It's interesting you mentioned the last one. I just recently, I sort of got out of the habit of carrying a sketchbook, and I just started doing it again. I had a little leather case made for a field note size, which is roughly 3 by 5 inches. I don't know what that is in the A6 or something like that, but it's little, pocket sized.
Yeah.
And, most of the time I don't draw in it, but there's something comforting when I touch my leg and I feel that notebook, and I always have a pen with me. To feel the notebook and the pen and know that at any time I can bring out a notebook and I can capture an idea right wherever I am, which is really great. And the other tip that I'll tell people is, if you have young kids like I do, when you're in a restaurant waiting for your appetizers, you're waiting for your meal, I play the game with my sketchbook where I'll do a scribble and I'll make the kids make something out of it. So, and then they get to scribble and I've got to make something out of it. And it's a nice way to pass the time. You're not on screens. You're having fun together, and it's a bit of a game, and then suddenly, hey, time has passed and the appetizer's here. So it can have some side effects as well for your kids in a positive way. So, extra tip from Mike.
I fully agree with that, and my daughter and I call that game Squiggle Master.
Oh, there we go.
We play that a lot too.
Yeah,
we
cool.
always play that. So definitely keeping it on you is useful for more than one thing, right?
Yeah.
Julian Klit.
For me, one of the greatest inspirations is to work with shapes and to change the shapes of things, because I feel that it often has a huge impact. So if you always draw round heads, then if you start drawing triangular heads or square heads, then that makes a huge difference. And obviously you can also stack shapes and combine them, and that doesn't only go for people but also other things. What I find interesting is that the shapes also communicate a certain quality. So triangular is often a bit more aggressive, square is more stable, and round is very harmonious and kind of centered. And to play with that, I think, is just a wonderful way of experimenting whatever you're drawing. So I can only encourage everyone to work with shapes and mix them up and find new ways of combining them.
That sounds good.
So that was my first tip. The other one is kind of a standard that I probably mention whenever I talk to people about how visual thinking works. It's about shifting from noun to verb. So when you're trying to draw something and you find it for some reason hard to draw, it's often easier to draw a verb that goes with it. Like, for example, if you were going to say you hold a meeting, it's of course you can draw a meeting. You can just draw a bunch of people sitting around a table, but it's not a very interesting image, and it's also a lot of work to draw, especially if you put a lot of detail into the people. So instead you could just focus on hold, and you could draw a hand that holds either the table or just the word meeting. And so by shifting, I find it's a trick that I use in graphic recording often, and also when I'm trying to come up with new ideas. It's often such an easy way of shifting your mind into a slightly different track, but it makes a huge difference. So I really like doing that, and can only encourage people to do it.
Great. What about your third tip?
Well, my third tip is always carry a pin and some thread, because if you need to draw a really large circle and you want it to be a round circle, that's the easiest way to actually make that happen. You just attach a pencil or even a marker to the thread, to the string, and the other end to the pin, and you push it into your foam board or your paper or the wall, and then you go around, and voila, you have a big circle. And I think it's wonderful that it's so easy, yet many people struggle with drawing big circles.
It's pretty adjustable too, right? Because you just wind it around the pin and get a smaller circle, and so you can do a target pretty easily, right? You just keep the pin in the same place and keep winding it up and get your radiuses down until you get it just right. It's
super versatile, and it's easy to just put in your bag with your markers. It won't add much weight. It's super useful.
That's a great tip. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that's a wonderful one. Very practical.
Yeah, I like practical tips.
Me too. This episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast is brought to you by Concepts, a perfect tool for sketchnoting, available on iOS, Windows, and Android. Concepts' vector-based drawing feature gives you the power to adjust your drawings anytime you like. You can nudge the curve of a line, swap out one brush for another, or change the stroke thickness and color at any stage of your drawing, saving hours and hours of rework. Vectors provide clean, crisp, high-resolution output for your sketchnotes at any size you need, large or small. Never worry about fuzzy sketchnotes again. Concepts is a powerful, flexible tool that's ideal for sketchnoting. Search Concepts in your favorite app store to give it a try. The Sketchnote Army Podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohdesign Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of AMP Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.